right, that's what I'm talking about. Easy, like Sunday morning, folks. What's up? Little CCR for you. This is Michael. As usual, on the graveyard shift in the wee hours of the night with your daily trivia question. I hope your week has been good. Time for a new one. Getting it started. It's not as cold as it was last night, but it's still a little chilly as far as I'm concerned on my end of things. That's for sure. But I can deal with it warming up a little bit. That's for sure. I'm ready for spring, quite frankly. I don't care what the Greyhound says. So anyways, I digress. Getting right to it. The answer to the previous trivia question was none other than Mr. Strom Thurmond. Strom Thurmond from South Carolina. This guy, I'm telling you, wow, what a history. South Carolina Senator Strom Thurmond, who, as we all know, if you don't know the history of this guy, he's a staunch conservative, a fierce segregationist, an overall racist ideology, presidential candidate in 1948 on the Dixiecrat platform. That was part of the trivia question. That's a true story. That really happened in the 1940s. He did all this after he was the governor of South Carolina. But anywho, he went on to be the main driving force behind the 1972 attempt to deport the late John Lennon of the Beatles fame. Because if you can believe that, because of the fear that Lennon was associated with radical elements working to dump Nixon, to get rid of Tricky Dick Nixon. And he was associating with new left leaders, according to Strom Thurmond. All this from John Lennon. Wow. The memo that were eventually released and obtained under the Freedom of Information Act showed that on February 4th of 1972, which was the focus of the trivia question, Strom Thurmond wrote to Attorney General John Mitchell, the same John Mitchell later of Watergate fame, stating the matter should be considered, the matter of deporting John Lennon from the United States should be considered at the highest level, and if Lennon's visa is terminated, it would be a strategy countermeasure, quote unquote. All that high-tech talk. So the Thurmond memo, the so-called Thurmond memo, argued that radical leftists had devised a plan to hold rock concerts in various primary election states using Lennon as the top-secret drawing card. Golly, this guy. I'm telling you. And this was for the primary purpose to disrupt the GOP and the Republican Party in general. John Lennon was going to do all this, right? Okay, so 1 month later, the Immigration and Naturalization Service did, in fact, actually revoke Lennon's visa and began deportation proceedings. Now, that goes to show you right there, folks, how much pull Strom Thurmond still had. How much pull he had to begin with is beyond me as far as reasoning concerned, this guy. But he still had some pretty considerable pull heading into the 70s. All right, and that just proves it right there. Consider the era now. And why these beliefs were spread by the likes of Strom Thurmond, right? This was where Vietnam had escalated to a very high point, okay? Kent State shootings had occurred by the National Guard. Lennon had left the Beatles years prior, and he was immersed in his peace movement, having bed-ins and peace-ins, penning anthems like Give Peace a Chance and so forth. A lot of people did not like this and considered the peacenik and kind of anti-war movement a thing of the past, and quite frankly, an annoyance. And Strom Thurmond was one of them, who was obviously heavily involved in politics. Lennon was associated also with radicals, and sometimes violent radicals. And this was the likes of Abbie Hoffman, the Chicago 7, Jerry Rubin, Bobby Seale from out on the West Coast. Okay. Additionally, Lennon had a powerful influence, as we all know, with a younger generation, quite frankly, 18 to 20-year-olds, who would be allowed for the very first time under Nixon to vote in the 1972 presidential election. So you see where all this kind of ties into this culmination, right, of wanting to get Lennon deported. Thurmond was also the acting chairman of the Senate International Security Committee. So he had some pull in that regard, and as I stated before, he had some political pull, as it were, since he had obvious longevity in federal public service. An FBI investigation of Lennon would subsequently turn up no evidence of involvement in illegal activities, which I think everybody knew from the beginning. And fortunately, in 1975, a New York State Supreme Court judge reversed a deportation order for John Lennon, allowing him to remain legally in his adoptive home of New York City. And in doing so, the court asserted and found in their final hearing, stating that the courts will not condone selective deportation based on secret political grounds. Poor Strom Thurmond. He lost that one as well. So Lennon would go on to get his green card. And in case you did not know, he became a United States citizen. He would go on to get his green card in 1976. There's a picture of him and Yoko Ono holding up his green card. And, of course, 4 years later, he was tragically murdered by Mark David Chapman outside of his home in New York City. Strom Thurmond served as a senator from South Carolina for 48 years. This guy lasted for 48 years. He died in 2003 at the age of 100 years old. Good old Strom Thurmond. Died probably writing memos trying to get people deported. All right, folks, one more day of the weekend of rest and relaxation. Keep it easy like Sunday morning, please, all day long, and we'll get back to the grind tomorrow. In the meantime, here's a new trivia question for February 5th. On this day, in 1937, President Franklin Roosevelt, this was just after he became president, announces a packing plan to expand this federal organization because a quote-unquote majority of their members were hostile to many of his domestic New Deal programs. Good luck, folks. I'll be back tomorrow. Peace out.